My son, Marcus, believed my dead wife's life insurance money was already his. To speed up the transfer, he slid a power of attorney document under my hospital pillow while I was recovering from hip surgery, expecting the morphine to make me compliant enough to sign without reading. He had no idea that I had spent 42 years as a pharmacist, that I knew exactly what morphine does and, more importantly, what it doesn't do. The moment he walked out of that room thinking he'd won, my old life as a trusting father ended and a new one began. A life where I would make my own decisions about who deserved the legacy my wife and I had built together. Before I tell you what happened next, please subscribe to Whispered Vengeance and let us know in the comments where you are watching from. The fluorescent lights in Providence Hospital's orthopedic wing hummed with the same sterile indifference they'd had for decades. I lay in bed 3, staring at the acoustic tile ceiling, counting the tiny holes in each square panel. It was something to focus on besides the deep ache in my right hip, the one that had finally given out on me while I was reaching for a book on the top shelf of my home library. The fall had been sudden and absolute, my body hitting the hardwood floor with a crack that I felt more than heard. My neighbor, Mrs. Kowalski, found me 2 hours later when she came to return my hedge trimmer. The surgery had gone well, according to Dr. Patricia Morrison, a competent woman in her 50s who reminded me of my late wife in the way she spoke, direct but kind. They'd replaced the joint with titanium and high-grade polymer, modern materials that would probably outlast the rest of me. The anesthesia had worn off around noon, leaving me with a prescription for oxycodone that I'd only taken once. I knew what that drug could do, how it wrapped itself around your brain's pain receptors like a comfortable blanket you never wanted to remove. I'd spent my career at Bartell Drugs on Capitol Hill, watching good people become shadows of themselves because of pills, just like the ones in the small paper cup on my bedside table. I was 73 years old, a widower of 6 years, and until 3 days ago, I had been living independently in the same craftsman house on Mercer Island that Helen and I had bought in 1981. The house where we'd raised Marcus, where Helen had tended her rose garden every Sunday after church, where we'd hosted Thanksgiving dinners for 23 consecutive years. The house that was now worth $2.8 million according to the latest Zillow estimate, a number that seemed obscene for a place that had cost us $89,000 when we were young. Helen had been a nurse at Swedish Medical Center for 37 years. She died of pancreatic cancer in 2019, 3 months after diagnosis. Fast and brutal. The life insurance policy she'd maintained through the hospital, combined with our retirement savings and the house, meant I was sitting on an estate worth approximately $4.2 million. I hadn't asked for that wealth. It had simply accumulated over a lifetime of 2 people working, saving, and living modestly. Helen used to joke that we were depression babies, even though we'd both been born in the early 50s. Our parents had lived through hard times, and they'd taught us to save, to prepare, to never assume tomorrow was guaranteed. Marcus knew about the money. Of course he did. He'd asked me about it 6 months ago over dinner at Daniel's Broiler, a steakhouse overlooking Lake Union where he'd insisted on meeting. He was sitting across from me in a suit that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, his wife, Victoria, beside him in a dress that I later learned was Prada. They'd ordered the most expensive wine on the menu without looking at the price. And halfway through the meal, after his second glass, Marcus had leaned forward with that practiced smile he used in his hedge fund pitch meetings. "Dad," he'd said, "Victoria and I have been talking. We want to make sure you're set up properly. You know, for the future. Have you thought about updating your will? Making sure everything's in a trust? There are tax implications you might not understand." I'd understood perfectly. What he meant was, have you made sure I'm the beneficiary? Have you locked it down so I get everything? I'd smiled politely and told him I'd think about it. That conversation had been the first crack in the foundation. The first moment I'd seen my son not as my son, but as someone with a balance sheet where I was an asset waiting to be liquidated. Now, lying in this hospital bed with my hip held together by screws and polymer, I was watching my son walk into the room with that same smile. Victoria wasn't with him this time. He was alone, carrying a leather messenger bag I recognized as the one I'd bought him for his business school graduation. He set it down on the rolling table that swung over my bed, and pulled up the visitor's chair. "Hey, Dad," he said, his voice pitched with false brightness. "How are you feeling? They treating you okay here?" "Hip hurts," I said, keeping my voice slightly slurred, as if the pain medication was affecting me more than it was. "But I'm managing." "Good, good." He unzipped the messenger bag and pulled out a manila folder. "Listen, I know this isn't the best time, but I need to talk to you about something important. While you're here recovering, I've been thinking about what happens if something goes wrong. If you need long-term care, if you can't make decisions for yourself, we should have a power of attorney in place, just as a safety net." I watched him carefully. His hands were steady, but there was a tightness around his eyes, a tension in his jaw. This wasn't a casual suggestion. This was planned. Power of attorney, I repeated slowly, making my words slightly thick. "That's a big thing, Marcus." "It is, but it's standard, Dad. Everyone does it. It just means that if you're unable to make financial decisions, I can step in and handle things. Pay your bills, manage your accounts, make sure the house is taken care of. It's for your protection. For my protection." The phrase hung in the sterile air. I let my head sink back into the pillow and closed my eyes, as if the conversation was tiring me. Through my barely open eyelids, I watched him slide the folder closer to me. "Why don't you just look it over?" he said softly. "I'll leave it here. No pressure. But if you could sign it before you're discharged, it would really give me peace of mind." He stayed for another 10 minutes, making small talk about the weather, about a restaurant Victoria wanted to try, about nothing that mattered. Then he left, pulling the door closed behind him with a soft click. I waited, counting my breaths. 1 minute, 2 minutes. Then I heard voices in the hallway, just outside my door. Marcus's voice, and Victoria's. She must have been waiting out there the whole time. "Did he sign it?" Her voice was sharp, impatient. "Not yet. He wants to read it first." "For God's sake, Marcus. He's on morphine. How much reading can he do? We need this locked down before he talks to anyone else, before he changes his mind again." I know. But if I push too hard, he'll get suspicious. You saw what happened at dinner when I brought up the trust. He shut down completely. We're running out of time. The redemption period for the Thornwood Fund closes in 3 weeks. If we can liquidate the Mercer Island house and his Vanguard accounts, we can cover our position and come out ahead. But we need that power of attorney. My blood went cold. Liquidate. The house. My accounts. The word redemption hung heavy with implication. Marcus was in trouble. Financial trouble. And my assets were his emergency fund. "He'll sign it," Marcus said, his voice dropping lower. "He trusts me. He always has. By tomorrow morning, we'll have what we need." Their footsteps faded down the hallway. I lay perfectly still, my mind racing. Marcus wasn't trying to help me. He was trying to access my money to cover some kind of investment loss. The power of attorney wasn't a safety net for me. It was a key to my accounts for him. I reached for my phone on the bedside table, my movements careful and deliberate. The morphine they'd given me for pain was a specific dosage, 0.5 milligrams, administered 6 hours ago. I'd been a pharmacist since 1975. I'd calculated thousands of dosages, counseled thousands of patients on side effects and interactions. I knew exactly what morphine did at that level. It dulled pain, created a slight sense of euphoria, maybe some mild confusion if you weren't used to it. But it didn't incapacitate you. It didn't make you legally incompetent. Marcus was counting on me not knowing that, counting on me believing I was too drugged to think clearly. He'd made a critical error. He'd forgotten what I did for a living, or maybe he'd never really understood it. To him, I'd just been Dad who worked at the pharmacy. He didn't understand that being a pharmacist meant being a scientist, a counselor, a guardian against medication errors. It meant knowing drugs better than most doctors. And right now, that knowledge was the only weapon I had. I looked at the manila folder on the rolling table. I didn't touch it. I didn't want to leave my fingerprints on it in a way that suggested I'd been coherent enough to examine it thoroughly. Instead, I turned on my phone's voice recorder and slipped it under my pillow. The microphone pointed toward the door. Then I pressed the nurse call button. A young woman in scrubs appeared within 2 minutes. Her name tag read Jennifer, RN. "Hi, Mr. Chen," she said warmly. "What can I help you with?" "Could you do me a favor?" I asked, letting my voice sound tired but clear. "Could you note in my chart that I'm declining further morphine? I want to switch to just acetaminophen. The morphine makes me feel too foggy." She looked surprised. "Are you sure? You just had major surgery. Most patients need the stronger medication for at least the first 48 hours. "I'm sure. I've been a pharmacist for over 40 years. I know my tolerance. The acetaminophen will be sufficient." She made a note on her tablet. "Okay, I'll update your chart and let Dr. Morrison know. She'll probably want to talk to you about it on rounds tomorrow." "That's fine. And Jennifer, could you also note the time I made this request? I want it documented exactly when I decided to go off the morphine." She looked at me more carefully then, her professional instincts sensing something beneath the surface. "Of course, Mr. Chen. It's right here. 3:47 p.m., October 19th. Patient requested discontinuation of morphine. Prefers acetaminophen only. Patient reports clear thinking, no confusion, oriented to time and place." "Perfect. Thank you." After she left, I picked up the folder with a tissue from the box on my bedside table, careful not to leave clean prints. I opened it and read through the power of attorney document. It was comprehensive and brutal. If I signed it, Marcus would have immediate access to all my financial accounts, the ability to sell my property, the authority to make medical decisions on my behalf, and crucially, the document claimed I was of sound mind, but made several references to my advanced age and recent medical trauma. It was designed to look legitimate while being executed under circumstances that were anything but. The signature line was at the bottom of page 7. There was a witness line beside it, already signed by someone named Thomas Brennan, Notary Public. I recognized the setup immediately. Marcus had pre-signed the witness portion, probably with some notary friend of his who hadn't actually witnessed anything. All I had to do was add my signature, and it would be legally binding, at least long enough for Marcus to start moving my assets before anyone could challenge it. I took out my phone and photographed every page of the document. Then I carefully tucked it back into the folder, exactly as Marcus had left it. I wasn't going to sign it, but I wasn't going to refuse it either, not yet, because I needed Marcus to think everything was going according to his plan. That night, after the evening nurse had checked my vitals and dimmed the lights, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to my granddaughter Emma, Marcus's daughter from his first marriage. She was 19, a sophomore at the University of Washington studying pre-pharmacy. We'd always been close. She'd spent summers with Helen and me when she was younger, helping her grandmother in the garden, listening to my stories about the old days at the pharmacy. "Grandpa?" Her voice was worried when she answered. "Are you okay? Dad said you had surgery." "I'm fine, sweetheart. Hip replacement. I'll be dancing at your wedding someday." She laughed, the sound bright and real. "I'll hold you to that. Do you need anything? I can come visit tomorrow." "Actually, yes. I need a favor, and it's important. Can you come early, around 7 a.m., before your father arrives?" There was a pause. "Is everything okay? I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" "Of course, Grandpa. I'll be there." The second call was to Benjamin Park, the attorney who'd handled Helen's estate. Ben was 71, a Korean immigrant who'd come to Seattle in 1968 with nothing. He'd put himself through law school working nights at a warehouse. Helen and I had helped him once, years ago, when his daughter needed emergency surgery and he didn't have insurance. We'd paid the hospital bill, told him to pay us back whenever he could. He'd sent us a check for the full amount 5 years later, with 15 years of interest calculated at the going rate, even though we'd told him not to worry about it. Ben was a man who remembered debts, both financial and moral. "Robert," he said when he answered, his voice gravelly with age, "I heard about your fall. How are you holding up?" "I've been better, Ben. Listen, I need to see you tomorrow, early. Can you come to Providence Hospital around 7:30? "Of course. What's this about?" "I'll explain when you get here. But bring paperwork for a new will. And bring your notary stamp." The third call was the hardest. I dialed the number for Providence's Social Services Department and asked to speak with the on-call social worker. A tired-sounding woman named Patricia answered. Miss Patricia, I said carefully, my name is Robert Chen. I'm a patient in orthopedics, room 3. I need to report a suspected case of elder financial exploitation. The target is me. There was a long pause. Mr. Chen, this is a serious allegation. Can you tell me what's happening? I told her everything. The overheard conversation. The power of attorney document. The plan to liquidate my assets. She listened without interrupting. And when I finished, she said, I'll be there first thing tomorrow morning to document this. In the meantime, I'm going to flag your chart. No one except your primary care physician will be allowed to make changes to your medical care plan without your explicit verbal consent, and will require that consent to be witnessed by staff. Thank you, I said quietly. Mr. Chen, you did the right thing calling. Most people don't. They're too ashamed, or they don't want to believe their family would hurt them. You're protecting yourself, and that takes courage. After I hung up, I lay in the dark and thought about Marcus as a child. I remembered teaching him to ride a bike in the driveway of our old house, running beside him with my hand on the seat, letting go when he was ready. I remembered his high school graduation, how proud Helen and I had been. I remembered the first time he'd brought Victoria to meet us, how I'd thought she seemed sharp and ambitious, and how Helen had whispered to me later that night, she looks at our house like she's already calculating the sale price. Helen had seen it before I had. She'd always been better at reading people. I'd wanted to believe the best in our son. I'd wanted to think that the values we'd taught him, about honesty and hard work and caring for family, had taken root. But somewhere along the way, Marcus had learned a different lesson. He'd learned that money was more important than integrity, that his parents were resources to be managed rather than people to be honored. I didn't sleep much that night. The pain in my hip was manageable, but the pain in my heart was not. Emma arrived at 6:55 the next morning, carrying 2 Starbucks cups and a brown paper bag that smelled like cinnamon rolls from the bakery near campus. She was wearing jeans and a UW hoodie, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked so much like Helen at that age that it made my chest tight. "Grandpa," she said, setting the coffee and bag on my rolling table. "You sounded weird on the phone. What's going on?" I gestured for her to close the door, and when she did, I handed her my phone. "I need you to watch a video," I said. "It's going to be hard to see, but I need you to know the truth." The video was the recording I'd made yesterday, the audio of Marcus and Victoria's conversation in the hallway. I watched Emma's face as she listened, saw the confusion turn to disbelief, then to anger. When it finished, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Dad's trying to steal from you?" "Not steal, exactly. Legally access with my permission. But yes, essentially." "Why?" "He makes good money. The fund has been doing well. He's always talking about deals and returns. And," she stopped, her eyes widening, "unless it hasn't been doing well. Unless he's in trouble. That's what I think too." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to protect myself. And I'm going to protect your grandmother's legacy. But I need your help. I need you to be my witness, Emma, to everything that happens today. Can you do that?" She nodded, wiping her eyes. "What do you need me to do?" Benjamin Park arrived at 7:30, carrying a worn leather briefcase that I'd seen 100 times. He was shorter than I remembered, his hair completely white now, but his eyes were still sharp and kind. He shook Emma's hand, then mine. "Robert," he said, settling into the visitor's chair. "Tell me everything." I did. I showed him the power of attorney document, played him the recording, explained what I'd overheard. He listened with the focused attention of a lawyer who'd built his career on helping people who had no one else to turn to. When I finished, he opened his briefcase and took out a yellow legal pad. "First things first," he said. "We document your mental capacity. Emma, I need you to witness this. Mr. Chen, can you tell me today's date?" "October 20th, 2024. "Who is the current president?" "Joe Biden." "What hospital are we in?" "Providence Hospital, Seattle. Orthopedic wing." "Why are you here?" "Hip replacement surgery. Fell reaching for a book 3 days ago." Ben made notes, then looked at Emma. "Did his answers seem confused or uncertain to you?" "No," Emma said firmly. "He's completely clear. More clear than my roommate on a good day. Ben smiled slightly. Good. Now, Robert, let's talk about what you want to do. You called me about a new will. Yes. I want to revoke any previous documents. I want to create a new will that's ironclad, that can't be contested. And I want to make sure that if anything happens to me, my assets go where Helen would have wanted them to go. Where is that? I'd thought about this all night. There's a scholarship fund at the UW School of Pharmacy. It's called the Helen Chen Memorial Scholarship. I established it after she died, been contributing every year. I want the bulk of my estate to go there. The house, I want it sold and the proceeds to go to Mary's place, the homeless shelter Helen volunteered at every Christmas. And I want Emma to receive all my personal effects, family photos, anything with sentimental value, plus enough for her to finish school without loans. Emma's eyes filled with tears again. Grandpa, you don't have to. Yes, I do. You're the only one who visits me just because you want to see me, not because you're checking on your investment. You're the only one who remembers your grandmother's birthday every year. You're the only one who still calls. Ben was writing rapidly. What about Marcus? Marcus gets $1, not $0, because that could be contested as an oversight. $1, with a clause that explicitly states this is intentional, and that any challenge to the will results in that $1 being revoked and donated to charity as well. That's called an in terrorem clause. It's legal in Washington state. It's also a message. That's exactly what I want it to be. Patricia Chen, the social worker, arrived at 8:15. She was a stocky woman with gray hair and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd seen too much human cruelty to be shocked by anything. She interviewed me separately from Ben and Emma, recording the conversation on a hospital-issued tablet, documenting my account of events with the thorough precision of someone building a legal case. Mr. Chen, she said when I finished, I'm going to do several things. First, I'm placing a note in your chart that you are not to be presented with any legal documents without a hospital representative present. Second, I'm recommending a full capacity evaluation by our staff psychiatrist, Dr. Lewiston. He'll be up within the hour to interview you. Third, I'm filing a report with Adult Protective Services. What your son is attempting falls under financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. It's not just unethical, it's criminal. I don't want to press charges, I said quickly. I just want to protect myself. That's your choice. But the report needs to be filed regardless. It creates a paper trail. If your son attempts this with another elderly person in the future, there will be documentation of a pattern. Dr. Lewiston came at 9:30. He was younger than I expected, maybe 45, with wire-rimmed glasses and a gentle manner. He asked me questions for 30 minutes, simple ones and complex ones, testing my memory, my reasoning, my understanding of my financial situation. At the end, he looked at Patricia and said, Mr. Chen has full decision-making capacity. He's oriented, logical, and his concerns appear to be well-founded based on the evidence. I'd stake my license on it. Ben finished drafting the new will at 10:15. It was simple and clear, every clause designed to prevent challenge. Emma and Patricia witnessed my signature. Ben notarized it. Then he made 5 copies, keeping one for his files, giving one to me, one to Emma, one to Patricia, and mailing one to his office via certified mail. Redundancy, he explained. If Marcus tries to claim this was done under duress, we have multiple witnesses, multiple copies, and a documented trail of your mental capacity. What about the power of attorney he wants me to sign? I asked. Ben smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. Sign it. What? Sign it, but sign it with your middle name in the wrong place. Robert James Chen, but write it James Robert Chen. It's a small change, but it renders the document invalid. The notary signature won't match the principal signature. If Marcus tries to use it, any bank or financial institution will reject it on review. And if he tries to force it through, we'll have documentation of fraud. I looked at Emma. Your grandmother would have liked Ben. Grandma had good taste, Emma said. At 11:30, Marcus returned. Victoria was with him this time, dressed in expensive athleisure wear, her blonde hair perfectly styled. They both smiled when they saw Emma. Emma, Marcus said, pulling her into a hug. I didn't know you were coming. How's school? Fine, Emma said, her voice neutral. She didn't hug him back. Victoria's eyes swept the room, landing on the manila folder still sitting on my rolling table. How are you feeling, Robert? She asked, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Marcus was so worried about you yesterday. Better, I said, making my voice weak. The pain medication helps. Marcus pulled the folder closer to himself. Dad, did you get a chance to look over those papers I left? I did. It's a lot to take in. I know. But it's really just a formality, and it would make me feel so much better knowing you're protected. He pulled out a pen from his jacket pocket, an expensive Mont Blanc that had probably cost more than my monthly medication copays. If you're feeling up to it, we could just take care of it now. Emma can be a witness. Emma's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. I reached for the pen, my hand trembling slightly, and Marcus smiled. He laid the document flat on the rolling table and flipped to the signature page. I could see Victoria lean forward, her eyes fixed on my hand. I signed it, James Robert Chen. The handwriting was shaky, which was perfect. It looked like the signature of a man on pain medication, a man not quite in control. Marcus didn't even glance at it. He just pulled the document away, slid it back into the folder, and zipped it into his messenger bag. There, he said, relief flooding his voice. That wasn't so bad, was it? Now you're protected, and I can make sure everything's taken care of if anything happens. Thank you, I said softly. You're a good son. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. But Marcus smiled, and Victoria smiled, and they both hugged me before they left, their relief palpable. They thought they'd won. They thought they had the keys to my kingdom. They had no idea that the lock had already been changed. I was discharged from Providence 2 days later, but I didn't go home. Ben had arranged for me to go to Ida Culver House Broadview, a senior living facility that offered both independent living and skilled nursing care. Transitional recovery, Ben called it. You need physical therapy anyway, and it's better if Marcus doesn't have easy access to you right now. Let him think you're just being cautious about your recovery. My room at Ida Culver was small but comfortable, with a window overlooking the city. Emma helped me move in, bringing clothes from my house, my favorite books, and a framed photo of Helen that usually sat on my bedside table. She was careful, checking with me, before bringing anything of value, making sure I had everything I needed. Grandpa, she said as she was leaving that first evening, are you scared? No, I said honestly. I was scared when I thought I might lose everything your grandmother and I built. But now I'm just sad. Sad that it came to this. Do you think Dad will figure it out? That the signature is wrong? Eventually. But by then, it won't matter. She hugged me tightly. Grandma would be proud of you. After she left, I sat in the chair by the window and watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Then I made my next call, this time to Chase Bank, where I'd had my primary checking and savings accounts for 37 years. Mr. Chen, the branch manager said, when I explained what I needed, I want to be very clear about what you're asking. You want to freeze all accounts, require in-person verification with photo ID, and a verbal passphrase for any transactions over $1,000. And you want to remove all secondary authorized users. That's correct. My son is listed as a secondary user on 2 accounts. I want him removed immediately. May I ask why? You may ask, but I'm not required to answer. However, I'll tell you this. There has been an attempt at financial exploitation. I've filed reports with Adult Protective Services, and I have documentation from my attorney. I'm protecting my assets legally and appropriately. There was a pause, then the sound of typing. Consider it done, Mr. Chen. I'm putting a flag on your accounts right now. Even if someone has a power of attorney, they'll need to present the original document, and we'll need to verify the signatures with our legal department, which can take 7 to 10 business days. Will that work? That's perfect. I made similar calls to Vanguard, where my retirement accounts were held, and to the title company that handled my property deed. By the end of the evening, every financial institution that held my assets had been notified, flagged, and locked down. Marcus's fake power of attorney was useless. Even if the signature had been correct, the banks would have caught it in review. But this way, there would be no review. There would just be a polite rejection and a referral to the legal department. The first sign that Marcus had tried to use the document came 4 days later. Emma called me, her voice tight with barely suppressed laughter. "Grandpa, I just got a call from Dad. He said there's been some kind of clerical error with your bank accounts. He was trying to transfer funds to pay your medical bills, and Chase blocked him. He wanted to know if you'd gotten any weird calls from the bank." "What did you tell him?" "I told him I had no idea, and that maybe he should call you directly. He said he didn't want to worry you." "I bet he doesn't." The next sign came from Victoria's Instagram account, which Emma monitored. Victoria had posted daily for years, curated photos of her life, her designer clothes, her expensive brunches. But suddenly, the posts stopped. The last one was from a week ago. A picture of her at some charity gala, wearing what I recognized as a rental dress from one of those subscription services. The caption read, "Staying humble and grateful." Emma had screenshot it and sent it to me with the comment, translation, "We're broke." The third sign came from Ben. Marcus's hedge fund, Thornwood Capital, had filed a notice with the SEC regarding temporary redemption restrictions. In plain English, investors couldn't pull their money out. It was the kiss of death for a hedge fund, the public admission that there wasn't enough liquidity to cover withdrawals. Marcus was underwater, badly, and he'd been counting on my money to save him. I felt no satisfaction, just a deep, weary sadness. My son had gambled with other people's money, lost, and had tried to use me as his escape hatch. Now he was facing the consequences, and there was nothing I could do to help him, even if I'd wanted to. 6 weeks after my surgery, I was walking with just a cane, my physical therapy ahead of schedule. Ben called on a Thursday afternoon. "Robert, you need to know something. Marcus filed a petition with King County Superior Court. He's trying to have you declared mentally incompetent. He's claiming you're suffering from dementia and that you signed a will under duress while hospitalized. He's asking to be appointed as your conservator." I'd expected something like this, but hearing it still stung. What do? We go to court. We present our evidence. We have Dr. Lewiston's evaluation, Patricia Chen's report, Emma's witness statement, and the recording of Marcus's own words about liquidating your assets. It's an open and shut case. But Robert, it's going to be ugly. He's your son. Are you prepared for that? I looked at the photo of Helen on my bedside table. "Yes," I said quietly. "I'm prepared." The hearing was scheduled for early December, but it never happened. 3 days before we were supposed to appear in court, Marcus withdrew his petition. Ben called to tell me the news. "He dropped it," Ben said. "No explanation, just a notice of voluntary dismissal." "Why?" "I can only speculate. But my guess is his lawyer told him he had no case, and that pursuing it would only make things worse, especially if the recording of his conversation with Victoria was entered into evidence. That recording is proof of intent to defraud. The prosecutor could decide to file criminal charges based on that alone. Will they? Not unless you want them to. And I don't think you do." "No," I said. "I don't." 2 weeks later, on a cold morning in mid-December, Marcus and Victoria came to Ida Culver. They didn't call ahead. They just showed up at the front desk, demanding to see me. The receptionist, a kind woman named Susan, who I'd gotten to know over my weeks there, called my room. "Mr. Chen, your son is here. He's quite insistent. Do you want me to send him up?" "No," I said. "Tell him I'm not available." "He's saying it's urgent, that it's a family emergency." "Tell him I said there is no emergency that requires my immediate attention, and that if he continues to harass the staff, you'll call security." There was a pause. Then I heard raised voices in the background, Marcus's voice, angry and demanding. Then Susan came back on the line. "Mr. Chen, I'm calling security now. I'll make sure they don't bother you again." I hung up and walked to my window. From the 3rd floor, I had a view of the front entrance. I watched as 2 security guards, both large men in dark uniforms, escorted Marcus and Victoria out of the building. Marcus was shouting something I couldn't hear. Victoria was crying. They got into a car, an older Honda Accord that I didn't recognize. Not the Lexus SUV I'd seen them driving. They must have had to sell it. I watched them drive away. I felt hollow, empty. This was my son, the baby boy Helen had held in her arms, the child we'd loved and raised and sacrificed for. And now he was being escorted away from me by security guards, all because he'd chosen money over integrity, greed over love. I didn't sleep well that night. The following spring, on a bright April morning, I stood in the grand ballroom of the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. The room was filled with pharmacy students, faculty, and donors, all gathered for the annual UW School of Pharmacy Awards ceremony. I was wearing my best suit, the navy one Helen had helped me pick out years ago, and Emma was beside me in a simple but elegant dress. Dean Patricia Morrison, the same doctor who'd performed my surgery, was at the podium. She'd become dean of the pharmacy school 2 years ago, and she'd personally called me to invite me to this event. Today, she was saying, we have the privilege of awarding the Helen Chen Memorial Scholarship to its 5th recipient. This scholarship, endowed by Robert Chen in memory of his late wife Helen, a nurse who dedicated her life to caring for others, provides full tuition and living expenses to a pharmacy student who demonstrates both academic excellence and a commitment to community service. This year's recipient is Maria Garcia, a first-generation immigrant from Guatemala who has maintained a 4.0 GPA while volunteering at the NeighborCare Health Clinic in Rainier Valley. A young woman walked up to the stage, her face radiant with joy and disbelief. She accepted the award, shook Dean Morrison's hand, and then looked out at the audience. I came to this country when I was 12, she said, her voice strong despite the tears streaming down her face. My mother cleaned houses, my father worked construction. They had nothing to give me except their love and their faith that education could change my life. This scholarship isn't just paying for my school. It's telling me that I matter, that my dreams matter, that someone I've never met believes in me. Mrs. Helen Chen, wherever you are, thank you. And Mr. Chen, she looked directly at me. Thank you for keeping her memory alive in a way that changes lives. The room erupted in applause. Emma squeezed my hand. I couldn't speak. The lump in my throat was too large. After the ceremony, I walked with Emma through the sculpture garden at the Seattle Art Museum. It was one of Helen's favorite places. We sat on a bench overlooking Elliott Bay, watching the ferries cross the gray-green water. Have you heard from Dad? Emma asked quietly. No. Have you? He calls sometimes. He's working now, a normal job. Sales at a pharmaceutical company. Ironically, he and Victoria are separated. She filed for divorce last month. I'm sorry. Don't be. She was never good for him. Maybe this will be good for him in the long run. Losing everything. Maybe it'll teach him what really matters. I thought about that. Maybe, I said. Or maybe some people never learn. But that's not my responsibility anymore. I gave him everything I could when he was growing up. I gave him love and values and opportunities. What he chose to do with those things was his decision. And what I choose to do with what's left of my life is mine. The scholarship, Emma said. Maria, did you see her face? I did. That's Grandma's legacy. Not the house, not the money. That moment, right there. That girl getting a chance because Grandma and you believed in helping people. That's what your grandmother always said. She used to tell me, Robert, we're just temporary keepers of whatever we have. It doesn't really belong to us. We're supposed to pass it on, leave things a little better than we found them. She was right. We sat in silence for a while, watching the clouds move across the sky. Then Emma said, Can I ask you something? Do you still love Dad? I considered the question carefully. I love the person he could have been. I love the boy I raised. But the man he became, the one who tried to exploit me for money, I don't know him, and I'm not sure I want to. That's sad. Yes, I agreed. It is. But sometimes the saddest thing we can do is the right thing. I never saw Marcus again. I heard things, secondhand, through Emma, or through mutual acquaintances who didn't know the full story. He was working, trying to rebuild his life. He'd lost the house in Queen Anne, the expensive cars, the club memberships. He was living in a modest apartment in Shoreline, driving a used Toyota, shopping at grocery outlet instead of Whole Foods. Victoria had taken him for everything she could in the divorce, which was not much, but enough to hurt. I felt no satisfaction in his downfall, just a persistent, aching sadness that it had come to this. But I also felt something else, something I hadn't felt in years: peace. The knowledge that my assets would be used the way Helen and I had always intended, to help people who needed help, to create opportunities for those who had none. The knowledge that I'd protected not just my money, but my dignity, my agency, my right to make my own decisions about my own life. The house on Mercer Island sold the following summer. It went to a young family with 2 small children, a couple who reminded me a little of Helen and me when we were young. The proceeds, after taxes, came to just over $2 million. All of it went to Mary's Place, the homeless shelter Helen had loved. They used it to open a new facility in South Seattle, with space for 40 families. They named it Helen's House. I lived at Ida Culver for another year, then moved back to independent living in a smaller condo in Ballard. Emma visited every week. We'd have dinner together, talk about her classes, about her future plans. She wanted to specialize in geriatric pharmacy, helping elderly patients manage complex medication regimens. "Because of you and Grandma," she said. "Because I saw how much you cared about getting it right, about helping people understand their medications. I want to do that too." On what would have been Helen's 75th birthday, Emma and I went to the pharmacy school. There was a plaque on the wall now, in the main lobby, listing all the recipients of the Helen Chen Memorial Scholarship. Maria Garcia's name was there, along with 4 others. Next to the plaque was a photo of Helen, the one from our wedding day, her face bright with joy and hope. "She would have been proud of you, Grandpa," Emma said. "She would have been proud of you too," I replied. "And she would have been sad about your father. But she would have understood. She always understood." We stood there for a moment, looking at her picture. Then Emma said, "Grandma believed in second chances, didn't she?" "She did. But she also believed in consequences. She used to say, you can forgive someone and still protect yourself. You can love someone and still set boundaries. Those things aren't contradictory. They're necessary. Do you think Dad will ever understand what he did? I don't know. But whether he does or doesn't, it doesn't change what I did. I protected myself. I honored your grandmother, and I made sure our legacy would continue in a way that meant something. That's all I could do." As we walked out of the building and into the spring sunshine, I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of betrayal, of disappointment, of broken trust, it was still there. It probably always would be. But it no longer defined me. I was not the father who'd been exploited. I was the man who'd stood up for himself, who'd protected his wife's memory, who'd turned pain into purpose. My son Marcus had believed morphine would make me weak, that age made me vulnerable, that love made me blind. He'd been wrong on all counts. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is refuse to be a victim. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the consequences of their choices. And sometimes the greatest legacy you can leave isn't money or property. It's the example of how to live with dignity, even when the people closest to you try to take it away. If you've ever had to make the difficult choice between protecting yourself and protecting a relationship with someone you love, I want you to know this. Choosing yourself is not selfish. Setting boundaries is not cruel. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to let them fall, so they can learn to stand on their own. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And please subscribe to Whispered Vengeance for more stories about finding strength in unexpected places and protecting what matters most.